to each one of them for complaining because I'm not that kind of person. But yeah,
right.
I let them have it. But then I get on hugs.
Don't upset the mama bear.
I know, huh?
All right. Anyway, my clock says 1 o'clock, so we are now live broadcasting on YouTube for another Tech Talks. And for this session, let me put on the live transcript. I need to remind myself to do that. Okay, awesome. Just in case you need that. Perfect. So today's topic, we were going to talk about course homepages, why you might want to consider using them if you don't already, or if you do already use them. We'll talk about some ideas of some best practices for making a course home, hopefully as useful to your students as possible. Mm-hmm. So Nick, you were going to share your screen.
Yeah, so I think the first thing we're going to talk about is why you would use a course homepage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some analytics from essentially the course that we as IDs use the most, and that is our faculty development course. So this is our homepage that we've built. But one of the things that we want to consider is homepages are what the part of your course that is accessed the most. And sometimes it's a factor of 5 times more than other materials. Sometimes it's 10 times more than other materials. It is generally an anchor. So whether it is a homepage or it is a list of modules, whatever you have set is what is viewed first on coming in. So just to cement that idea is I'm going to pop over to my new analytics for our FactDev.
And this is something that you can do in your own classes sometime when you're curious.
Yep. So as a teacher or instructor in a Canvas course, you have access to this. So I click into new analytics and it'll give me some information about, I think it pops up first with course grades. Our FactDev course doesn't really focus on that, so that's not super pertinent to us, but it might be interesting for you. But I'm going to come over to weekly online activity. And the first thing it's going to show me is page views for whatever time period. And it's a week by week, so it doesn't give you a full scope. But if I scroll down, it's going to tell me the resources that are accessed the most in my course. In this case, for our FactDev course, which has been going on for a number of years, you can see our #1 resource is our course homepage. That's what people are looking for or access the most. Makes sense. It's your landing page. It's whatever resource comes up first when somebody accesses your course. And then we can see, so these are all images that are actually on the course homepage. So you'll see resources listed that are files and things like that in here. But the next thing down is our course modules, which would be the next, I would call it, utilized resource. And that's 2.6 thousand views. So
compared to
2,600.
26,000 views for the course home. So about a 10 times as many page views for the course home as for the next most commonly viewed page, basically.
And also something to consider is this is a course that people don't necessarily need to be accessing constantly, right? This is, you come in for professional development when you need it. If you're in an actual course that is running, students are going to be accessing it to a much higher degree because of the way that your course might be.
I would suggest that when you have time, sometime, you could even do it right now while we're doing this, if you're curious, go into one of your live courses, go to your new analytics and look at that list of resources and just see what comes up. You might not see this huge of a difference between the first most popular page and the second most popular, but I bet it's still a very large, stark difference between the two. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of our first point about if you use a course homepage, I guarantee you it is by far the most viewed page. Or what did Jennifer say? Don't we revisit the homepage for every comic cent per month? Well, we hope so, yeah. That's why we do it, right? The second point that we were going to make about why you should care about what the first thing your students see in a course is, it's kind of like your first impression, or the student's first impression of your course, but also you as the instructor. Like when you're teaching a face-to-face class, their first impression of you is when you walk in the door on the first day of class, right? But when we're talking about a fully online or even a hybrid class that's not often the case. In many cases, they may never see you face to face. They may never hear your voice in the classroom and see your body language and all those things. So your course is their first impression of you as an instructor, as a teacher, as a person, as a mentor potentially. That's how they view you as a person.
Yeah, and we also have to imagine this might be somebody's first time even accessing Canvas is your course, which is kind of a little bit of pressure, right? You've got somebody
Sure.
who's never used this resource, and then the first thing they encounter is your homepage.
Yeah, so no pressure there, but it's
Right, yeah.
in some cases, yeah, it's literally the first impression of online learning in general. So kind of a big deal. So it's worth taking some time to be intentional about how we present our courses.
Mhm.
So what we were going to do is just briefly run through kind of building out a homepage from scratch. I'm just reading the chat here. Course views might be disproportionate to e-learning homepage views. Yeah, like I said, it's not going to be the same proportion in every class, but I would recommend you go take a look at your own class and just see what comes up. It might be interesting. So anyway, we're going to build kind of a homepage from scratch because we were discussing this earlier. We came up with a very simple framework. If you've never built a course homepage, or if you do have one, but you want to be a little bit more intentional about its design, we were going to talk about kind of some components and building blocks of a homepage.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be anything super complex. Our idea here is try to break down any barriers that might occur on somebody's first introduction to your course, but also on their reintroduction every time they access it.
Yeah. So should we get into the demo course and start building?
Yeah, let me just double check.
Janelle says she looked at one of her courses and the homepage views are strikingly similar to the e-learning homepage. So I've looked at a few different courses, both including some live ones, and it does seem like in general, there's about between 5 times as many views as the second most viewed page and 10 or even sometimes 20 times as many views for the homepage. So yeah, go look at your own pages, but you'll probably see pretty similar trends.
And mind you, that's also depends on what you've also set up as your course homepage. So in our FacDev example, it is a specific page built in Canvas. For what we're going to start with in this little demo course is right now it's the default. Course modules is the homepage. Whenever somebody first accesses this is what they see. And I know some instructors might do something like a start here module right at the top, that kind of idea. But you have to know what to do with that, which is why sometimes it might be a little bit better to actually build out some sort of place to link people to those sections. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to jump into is just our pages tool over on our left. So if you haven't done this before, I think some of the people here have already experienced toggling this, but I've got an example homepage built right here. So if I wanted to make this my current homepage instead of the modules list that we have, I would come over to the right, I would select use as front page, and then I would make sure if I jump to home, once it's all built out, I would then be able to toggle right here what's actually showing up by clicking choose homepage. And then now that I've done that, I'll see pages front page, which is a little kind of weird to read, but it's
whatever page you have designated as the front page is what you would select.
So once I save that, it's going to pop up when I click home and when students first access.
So right now it's empty.
Yep, and that's what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly build that out based on those different blocks. So let's see. And Jennifer, would you mind kind of, I saw in the chat you said, my course homepage is the one students default to when they access the course. I see 20.7K views, doesn't seem legit information acquisition. Would you mind kind of extrapolating that out a little bit? I want to make sure I'm capturing that idea correctly.
Mostly I was just saying that homepage is always the first page that when students click on my course, it directly dumps them there. So I mean, even if they're there for a half a second, does that categorically say that they're going to be, is that going to be logged as a activity for them? Even if
does.
they don't click on
Yes.
anything?
So yes, even if they're only there for a half second and they go somewhere else, it still counts as the page view. I think the point we were making is not that they're engaging directly with that content every single time, but that it is the first thing their eyes see every single time that they go to your course, which is why we want to think about it as that first, both a first impression, but also continually your first impression with the course. That was really the only point we were trying to make there.
Right, right.
All right,
Yeah.
let's start building this sucker out.
Yeah, so I'm gonna edit, and it's just your normal page editor. So as I kind of go through this, keep in mind that you've got access to these tools. If you haven't done this before, but hopefully it's gonna be pretty familiar to those that have built in Canvas. If not, of course, reach out to us. We can help you with that process. But we kind of, Caleb and I were discussing, and one of the things with the homepage, and actually Jennifer hit on it, was that students are forced to be in this spot. Doesn't mean they're always searching for information, like they're not always looking for the homepage, but they're forced to be there. And sometimes it's that quick glance, but first time they're in the course, that's what they're going to search through. So we've got kind of 3 different areas. And our first one is that, who is your instructor? Let them know that they've essentially got to the right place.
That first impression.
Yeah.
It's like walking into a classroom for the first time and they're looking around and they're looking to make sure that they're in the right place. So they want to make sure that hopefully when they walk into that classroom the first time, they're seeing a friendly face, they're seeing an instructor who appears approachable and ready to help them. And it's kind of the same thing with your course. So, and again, this is kind of our opinion that we were discussing as we were planning for this session, but in my mind, at least, it is helpful to have a brief, friendly welcome message at the front. So the first thing they see is, welcome to my class. And then it would be nice for them to get just a very brief little introduction to you as a person. I think it only needs to be one short paragraph, couple of sentences, doesn't have to be your life story, but if you can kind of capture your own personal voice, your physical, your emotional presence, I guess, of who you are as an instructor in that first little paragraph that they see in the class, I think that's a huge help. I think it's also a help if they can see your face. So I think it's really nice to either have a little picture of yourself on that, in that next to that first intro paragraph, or maybe also a video. If you have a course introduction or a personal introduction welcome message video, you can embed it right there in the homepage.
And another way just to think about it is, what would you do in an on-ground class? This is that kind of quick and dirty version of that. You want to get your face out there. So it is not only this online course, but it is Nick's online course.
Sure.
That's who I'm going to be talking to. That's who's creating this content.
Well, and I'm thinking about when I was a student and I had instructors who, I'm sure we've all had instructors like this. When they walk into the door of the classroom, they don't look at the class. They keep their head down, they walk to the front. Sometimes they turn their back on the class immediately and they start writing on the whiteboard, right? Like I've been in those classes. It's kind of uncomfortable as a student when that is your first impression of a teacher, is the back of their head as they write instructions on the board. I kind of feel like a homepage is like that, right? So I like to be able to see my instructor. I like to get a sense of who they are as a person as the first thing that they see. So again, we're not going to be like super fancy with this homepage we're making. We're not doing any special styles or anything. We can certainly help you do that cool stuff later on. But the idea here is just those basic components. And I think the first component is that personal introduction, that first impression.
Well, and another thing to note is, I'm going to keep coming back to what Jennifer said about, the numbers we're seeing in our analytics. They're forced to be there. It's not I'm not spending hours and hours in this space, maybe a couple seconds as I click through once I get to know the course. But one of the things to think about is, the busier it is, the longer it's going to take them to get the important information. So don't feel like you have to build it out into this crazy, high design space. Short, sweet, succinct, What is the important information that they got to get? And that kind of brings us into this next element. So we've got our first block, we've got the course name. Students know that they're in the right spot. That might sound silly, but first time being online, I want to know I clicked the right place. 2, we got the about our instructor. That's where you start to put a little bit more of you, your pizzazz, insert awesome adjectives here. And then we want to think about, since this is the place that people hit first, what are the continuous needed resources? Do you use materials from a publisher that they're going to constantly have to access? Do you use Zoom for office hours? How do they get access to that? Do you have synchronous sessions? Just trying to pull together all of the ed tech you're using, all of kind of the ways that you've got things spread out in the online space.
And I think it's good to include all that information in like your course information module or your syllabus or both.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's that information that they're accessing constantly throughout the entire quarter and they need to find it all the time, it might be worth putting it right on that front page, front and center, easy to access. A graphic design concept that is pretty important to web page design is this idea of above the fold. So that actually comes from like newspaper design back in the day when you had a physical paper newspaper. Your paper is usually folded in half, right? And then stacked in a stack at the grocery store or the newsstand or whatever. And in newspaper design, they say above the fold is your headline. It's the thing that people see first before they pick up the whole paper, unfold it, and start reading. So in newspaper design, above the fold is what is your most important thing that you want people to see immediately. That concept also follows through into web page design, where you don't have a folded paper, but what you do have is a scroll bar, right? So when you are looking at a web page, first you'll see whatever's at the top of that page, and then there will be other content below that you have to scroll to get to, either on your desktop computer or laptop, but also on your cell phone. You have to swipe down to get to lower down on that page and that content. So I feel like it's important to think about what information is being seen at the very top of that page, above the fold, above the scroll, so to speak. So that's something to think about when you are building your pages. What do students see before they have to click any buttons or touch anything on their cell phone?
Awesome. And then I think that brings us to kind of this last block. So we split it into 3 to try to keep it as simple and succinct as possible, is kind of a table of contents. As instructors, we have kind of we've got the ability to build out how somebody goes through our course as bespoke as we want to. A lot of times people will use modules, but maybe that's not always the case. But either way, having that all right there on the home page, what people need to be doing either that week, that day maybe, that month, that the entire term, having that information front and center in a space that you can kind of update and change regularly is helpful.
What I think a lot of instructors do, and I'm a big proponent of it, and also student surveys tell us that this is what students prefer, is to have weekly modules in your module list. Week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that is usually the best way to organize your content. But the thing about that is, by the time you get to week 5, week 6 in the course, that means when you go into modules, you or the student has to scroll down to find the most current week. And if you have a fair amount of content in your class, that does take time. And honestly, sometimes it is easy for a student to kind of get lost in that great big scroll of modules. If you have this table of contents on your homepage, and maybe you're calling it week 1, January 2nd to January 8th, or whatever your class schedule is, again, it makes it very clear to the students where they're at and where they need to be right now, this day, this week. And it's very simple to do this. Nick is doing it in Canvas there with that quick link tool.
Yep, so all I did, and like I said, I'm in this course, it's based on modules. All I've done is I've come in and I've insert link, and actually let me remove it so I can do it in an easier fashion. So link, course links, and then I've got a list of everything in my course that I essentially can anchor to.
That you can link to directly to a particular module.
Yeah, as long as it's published. And so now I've linked to my course orientation. So we still have things like a getting started link to tell students who are new to the course where to go. But like Caleb said, it's just acting as another pathway to get them to where they need to go right there on the homepage. Sometimes if they're not familiar with the course yet, they might not know to go to modules directly. And with this, we can also, okay, it's after the first week or after the second week, it's probably safe to get rid of that getting started. And maybe I have dates. So this is supposed to be week, second. So I can put, that's probably not the best example of date range, but you can add dates in here. People can kind of look at it as a way to just keep things in line, since not everything might be in their course calendar and things like that. So once again, it can be dynamic. You can use it as this place to add things, subtract things.
And again, the design we're using here is basically no design at all. This is super simple. It's just a straight column of text. You can get more creative with this. I think I saw Jennifer say she uses the content tabs that we've talked about in e-learning, and we have in our faculty development module, which I think is a useful design tool. Other instructors will build sort of a box of content modules. You'll have a box for week 1 and a little picture to go with it. Week 2, a little picture. There's all kinds of different ways you can design this. You can add color to it. You can add some images. You can add some dividing boxes and background boxes to kind of separate the content. But at its base, we're really just thinking about these three components of a homepage: your course introduction and personal introduction, your immediate, constantly needed information, and then sort of your table of contents or your class schedule. And again, that's just one way of doing it. There's many other things you could include on a homepage, and I'm sure you do have your own particular things you do, but in our minds, at least after discussing this and looking at things, I feel like having those 3 components is important and worth considering when you're building your homepage. Before we ran out of time, we wanted to look at one other thing really quickly, something that I don't know if everybody knows how to do. You can set in your course settings so that if you use the announcements tool, your most recent announcement will show up at the very top of your homepage. By default, it doesn't do that. You have the announcements button over on the side of your Canvas course, and you can make announcements in there, and your students can click on it and see that. But I don't know how many students do that. So if you use your announcements on a regular basis, like a weekly announcement saying, this week we're doing X, Y, and Z, or important announcement, class canceled this week, or something like that, I think it's good to include those announcements on your homepage. So to do that,
Yeah, all we have to do is come down to settings, and I'm going to scroll down, and if I remember correctly, we got to go to more options.
Yep.
And then right here, the second option under that, show recent announcements on course homepage.
so
We
just
check
check that
that.
off.
We can then select how many of those we want. Keeping in mind, people aren't spending a lot of time on the course homepage as the course progresses. So generally sticking to the 1 to 3 range, because it will push your content lower. And
Yeah.
Caleb talked about above the fold.
Yeah, I wouldn't put 15 announcements on your homepage, because that's all they'll see. Maybe just 1, maybe 2, even 3 might be pushing it in my mind. But at least like the first most recent announcement, I think it's nice to put that on there.
Mhm.
So then if you update course details, do you have any announcements in this course, or do we need to make one real quick?
I think I'll make one real quick so we can see. So if I jump to home, we should have
Recent
right there.
announcements.
So
There's
it'll be
nothing
in
there.
between the level 1 heading or whatever your course's name. and
Let's
the
just make a
actual
real
announcements.
quick announcement. Let's show what that looks like.
And I'm going to make the quickest of announcements in that it's just going to be hi. We'll talk about instructor presence, I'm sure, in another session.
Yeah.
So obviously not a great use of announcements, but we're getting the point across that if we create that announcement, look at that, I come back home. And there it
there's
is.
the most recent announcement right at the top.
Yep. And then if somebody clicks into it, if I remember correctly,
If it's longer, you can click it and it'll show the whole. Yeah.
so I
it's a
can
larger
get
message.
to that announcement from there.
Yeah.
And then let's just take a look at the student view. in the student view, it should show up. Whoops, there we go. Not the immersive. Student view, we should see a little blue dot because I haven't read it yet. So it's right up there and kind of pulls attention. So
And I also like that it shows your little profile picture on there. Just another teeny little piece of
Yeah.
social presence in the class. Oh, it's a person, it's not just a robot.
Yeah, and as online instructors or instructors in general are always trying to push that presence as much as we can.
So make sure you have a profile picture if you don't already.
Hey guys,
so-
I have a quick question for you about the picture, the profile picture there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, I use some some assignments or what am I trying to say? Announcements I use over and over again. For example, like letting students, asking students to fill out their evaluation or letting them know, hey, here's the drop dates or whatever. And so I've noticed that when I reuse an announcement from a course over the same course, but from quarter to quarter, my profile picture goes away. And then it's just like, just the, do you know what I'm talking about? And do you know how to change that?
Jennifer just posted that in the chat as well, that if you're using a blueprint or a master course and copy the announcement over, it does not copy your profile picture, which is interesting.
I use neither blueprint nor master and it still doesn't.
Interesting. Jerry's still in here. I wonder if he can comment.
It does the same thing if you copy from term to term.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Template courses are the same as copying from term to term. You're just copying from one course shell to another. And the problem is it's a function of, it's something that used to work that stopped working when they pushed out an update, and instructor still hasn't figured out what caused it to break.
Oh, okay, so maybe they will fix that eventually.
Sure,
But I mean,
yeah.
that's a good point. I think, Jennifer said that she reposts the announcement as a new one every time. And it might be worth doing that just because I do think having that little profile picture, it's not a big thing, it's a little thing, but I think those little things add up to more sense of a person on the other side of the screen. And it's not hard to just copy and paste the whole text and repost it real quick. It's all still there so you can access it. But that's a really good point, Jennifer and Janelle. Thank you.
Fortunate because it takes more time, right?
Yeah.
You're doing 1,000 things and now we have to worry about that, right?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much everything we had on our list. Did we cover all of it?
Yeah, I think just to kind of reiterate, we talked about, we have our initial course communication through this space. So welcome to your course.
I'm your instructor. I'm a human being with real life outside of Canvas.
Yep.
And you
Please
should
treat me as such.
Yeah, exactly. And then, what are those critical pieces of information that students need to access constantly? Zoom links, publisher links, class meeting dates, anything like that that you are worried that they miss when it's inside of the course information module. Just put it right up there. Just let's not even mess around with it and put it right on the course homepage. And then some sort of table of contents or class schedule, I think, is super helpful.
And maybe one final thought.
Mhm.
Don't be scared to repeat information that's in your syllabus or elsewhere in your course.
Yep.
We all know how students are. I won't even say it, but having repetition is really helpful for just getting them connected,
Yes.
especially nowadays where there's a lot of things competing for everybody's attention and things like that.
Yep. And then again, this design is a total lack of design, and the sky's the limit on how creative and visually interesting you want it to be. And that's something that we can talk about in a future session or talk about one-on-one. If there's anything you want to play around with, we're happy to do that.
Mhm.
But that's just kind of the basic building blocks of a visual page. And we have a couple minutes here. We don't need to leave right away. So I'm curious if anybody has any ideas or anything that you do in your course that you're particularly proud of, or if you want to push back on anything that we said here and provide an alternative opinion, we'd love to hear it.
Well, I don't use that homepage. I have just a basic introduction module.
Mhm.
I suspect I might be inclined to have a homepage, a Canvas page as my homepage for like the first week.
Mhm.
But then it would disappear because to me, it just becomes a second click that's unnecessary for the students to access the modules.
Sure. Well, and I think it matters a lot about the context, right? If this is not the first time that your students have had you as an instructor, if this is, the second or third in a sequence of classes, then it may not be as important. I do like the idea of at least having a homepage for the first couple of weeks so that they have that first impression. But afterwards, if you want to turn that off and go back to the modules, if there's a lot of stuff you just want them to get right into, I think that totally makes sense.
Mhm.
Cameron, I'm curious if you get any feedback from students one way or the other about course design decisions when it comes to that.
Well, like I said, I've never done this Canvas page type of thing. I
Okay.
just have a single module that has introductory material, and it's the stuff, like you say, that they
Yeah.
will access all the time.
Yes, yes. No,
So-
that's good.
and And some of that I've used I created tabs in the course nav,
Mhm.
like how to start a Zoom meeting, how to schedule a meeting with me.
Oh, perfect, yeah.
That's always there.
Sure. Oh, that was something else we were going to mention just briefly is it's worth mentioning that there is a limitation or a downside to relying too heavily on that Navbar. And the
Oh,
downside is students that are either using the Canvas app on their phone or just using their browser on their smartphone. Probably you won't be able to see this from where I am.
I might be able to actually share the screen from my phone.
Man, you probably can't see that very well. So I'll just describe it. But when you open up Canvas on a smartphone in your web browser and you go to a course, the very first thing you see at the top is any announcements, if the announcements are turned on, and then you see whatever the homepage is. And then if you scroll all the way down the bottom, oh, there's still no nav bar. Turns out the nav bar is hidden underneath a button in the top right corner,
Tiny,
when
tiny
you're
button.
a little downward facing arrow button. And if you tap on that, then that opens up your sidebar, including your links to modules, home, announcements, and then any custom links that you have in the course. Now, I still like using those custom links. I think those are good, but I do think it's worth mentioning that if a student is mostly using their cell phone to access Canvas, it's a bit of a limitation, and it's something that I don't think everyone is aware of.
And there's differences, and you're talking about specifically the browser version on a mobile device. Then we have the application, which has a
The
different
Canvas
layout.
app has a different interface.
The only
entirely.
thing consistent is the homepage.
Yeah.
So it can kind of help be that anchor and bridge.
Yeah, so even if you don't, if you still want to rely on the navbar, because I like the navbar and I like using the redirect link, it might be worth mentioning to your students, I have these links in the navbar, and when you're on a smartphone, you have to click on that, tap that little corner button to get to it. So yeah, we just wanted to make sure, thank you, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was important. Any other comments or ideas or anything that you do that you're proud of that you want to share? If not, we can call it a day, but we don't have to go anywhere yet. All right. Well, hopefully that was a productive introduction to some ideas about your course homepage design decisions. Again, if you want to talk about the visual design aspects, we would love to have that conversation also in the future, either one-on-one, or maybe we'll do another session on that as a future tech talk.
I'm seeing some thumbs ups. That might be the
Oh, Jared says, I appreciate the simplicity, low entry threshold. Well, good. Yeah, that was the goal there. So I'm glad.
and maybe we can get a little fancy in the next one.
Yeah. Well, we've done some past sessions about some fancier designs. We did one about content tabs and one about floating images and other design tips. So look in our previous, Cameron, yeah.
Well, one thing is consistency.
Mhm.
Years and years ago, I didn't even use modules. I used files.
Yeah.
And I did that because your computer uses files. And I thought students were used to finding things that way. But then as instructors started using more modules, students expected that. So I went to modules.
Yeah.
Are students expecting a homepage like this, or are students expecting to do BAM modules generally on campus?
I don't have a lot of student feedback on that particular question, because I think instructors are kind of all over the place. I think we're probably about half and half between using modules
Well,
and
and
using
maybe
home
that's the
pages.
important thing to note is either somebody is using a home page, kind of like we've done, or they're using modules.
Yeah,
I don't see much of anything else. And if I do, I usually tell them, hey, let's consider these options because it can get,
yeah.
students get lost in that process.
Yes, we can say pretty confidently that students do like to have weekly modules. That is, whether you use a homepage or not, I strongly recommend using weekly modules because it makes sense to do it chronologically. You're in week 1, you know you're in the week 1 module. You start at the top, you work your way down. The other nice thing about the modules is students get a little check mark next to the things that they've completed, so it's easy for them to keep track. I also like putting assignments directly in the modules rather than separate out in the assignments tab only. So that's also, Cameron's shaking his head vigorously, which I appreciate. Yeah, that's a good question though. I think we are about probably roughly half and half between using home pages and just going straight to modules.
And maybe the big thing to note about both is there's, for all of the courses that we find to be the most successful at our colleges, is having a getting started module or some way to link everybody who's coming into the course to the different important aspects. So yeah, whether that be you're using a homepage like this, or I know Cameron brought it up, using a introductory module.
Yep.
I think both kind of work hand in hand to get people where they need to go.
Agreed. And then Jennifer said, I love the homepage because of the announcement push too. Yeah, especially if you use announcements, I think it's super important. Although I think if you are only going straight to modules, I think you can still have it show the announcements at the top.
Yeah, it shouldn't
modules
change
if
that
it's your-
setting for us if I adjust it right now in real time. There we
Yeah,
go.
so even if you
Still
are just
should be
going
there.
straight to modules, you can still have the announcements show up at the top. So either way, I think it's worthwhile. Just because I don't know how many students know to go and click on the announcements tab on the side.
And it's just not part of a normal flow, right?
Yeah.
We're expecting students to hit our homepage, whatever it may be, and then look for what they need to do.
Yeah.
Very single track mind.
Yep, exactly. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and end our, I'm just looking at the chat here. Start module or intro module can be set so each item must be done in sequence before opening the next module. Yeah, that's probably a whole different topic to talk about, but yeah, some instructors like to do that where they want their students to go through the intro module before they do anything else. And you can actually set it up so that that is required. Yeah, that complete all items setting. And that might be worth a tech talk in the future, talking about that specifically. That's a good one. Anyway, all right, I'm going to go ahead and close our YouTube
Don't want to
channel.
take up more time than we need to. Everybody's got things to do.
Yes, thank you for joining us. And we will have a tech talk next week, but we don't have our March calendar up yet, but we will have that before.
Yeah, that should be coming shortly.
Yep. So stay tuned and we'll see you all next week. Okay.